I promised to transfer schools together with my childhood friend who was being bullied. But he changed his mind the day before the paperwork was finalized. His friend teased him. Wow, man, you really pulled it off, pretending to be bullied all this time just to trick Susan into leaving. She's been your childhood sweetheart since forever. Are you really okay with letting her go to a new school all alone? Thomas's tone was indifferent. It's just another school in the same city. How far could she possibly go? I was getting tired of her clinging to me every day anyway. This works out perfectly. That day, I stood outside the door for a long time, and finally chose to turn away. On the transfer application, I changed my destination from No. 3 high school in City C to the international high school abroad my parents wanted me to attend. Everyone forgot that Thomas and I were worlds apart from the very beginning. Chapter 1. The moment I heard the truth, my heart trembled violently. For the past month, Thomas had been beaten up and framed countless times. I did everything I could to help him avoid getting hurt, but there were always moments I couldn't prevent. Finally, when I could no longer stand it, I suggested that he transfer schools. At that time, Thomas had just been drenched with icy water. His handsome face was pale and pitiful as he held my hand helplessly. Susan, I'm scared to go to a strange place alone. Thomas and I had been childhood friends since kindergarten, going to and from school together for more than 10 years without change. And secretly, I had always loved him. So in a moment of impulse, I promised, don't be afraid. Wherever you go, I'll go with you. But now I realized that everything he did, all the bullying, all the helplessness, was an elaborate act just to make me leave. I couldn't help wondering, did Thomas really hate me that much? The voices from the private room continued. Susan's truly obsessed with you. Aren't you afraid she'll fall for someone else once she's at another school? She? Thomas gave a short, mocking laugh, as if he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. For me. She even dared to step in during a group fight. Even when she was beaten black and blue, she never backed down. You think a girl like that would stop loving me? Someone muttered quietly. Still, what if? Susan doesn't seem easy to mess with. Thomas's tone was lazy. There are plenty of rich young masters at No. 1 high. Have you ever seen her spare even a glance at anyone else? His tone inevitably carried a hint of contempt. She follows me everywhere, even a loyal puppy isn't that clingy. Laughter burst out in the room, sharp and stinging, like a slap across my face. I wanted to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the ground, forcing me to listen. To ache. Someone clicked their tongue in amusement. First time I've ever seen a guy personally push away a girl who's in love with him. Respect. Bro. But if you don't like how clingy Susan is, why not just tell her straight up? She doesn't seem like the kind to make a scene. Thomas clicked his tongue impatiently. Susan's too bold and attention-grabbing. If I said it outright, she wouldn't just walk away easily. Then he changed the subject. Besides, Vanessa feels insecure whenever she sees Susan. She only feels better when I'm around. For Vanessa's sake, I had no choice but to do this. Susan just has to suffer for a while. At those words, everyone immediately understood. By calculating the timing, they realized Thomas had started faking being bullied exactly 1 week after Vanessa transferred to No. 1 high. Someone laughed and cursed. Damn, man, you really moved fast, fell for the new girl already? Well, Vanessa is really sweet and delicate. It's only natural for guys to be drawn to her. Not like Susan, cold and distant all the time. Even if she's beautiful, it doesn't matter with that frosty attitude. The cruel comments about me surged like waves, one after another, and the Thomas the First had secretly loved for years neither stopped them nor defended me, sometimes even agreeing with a word or two. Standing outside the door, my heart sank into an endless abyss, hollow, suffocating, and aching. For a moment, I wanted to push open the door and scream at Thomas. Ask him why he lied to me. Ask if he ever felt even a flicker of guilt watching me get beaten for defending him. Ask if he ever thought about the friendship we'd shared for more than a decade. But then, my mother's words echoed in my mind, don't do unnecessary things. People don't rot overnight. I turned around and walked away from that private room. Chapter 2. A slow, fine pain, late to be noticed. At first I shouldn't have been this heartbroken. I could have treated it as a friend's betrayal and that would have been that. But the line called friend was the one Thomas crossed first. On the day we decided to transfer together, He dragged me to a bar to drink and celebrate our escape. Ambiguous light hung around us, and when I looked at the person I had quietly loved for years, I felt a little dazed. So when he leaned in and kissed me, I didn't refuse. Affection suppressed for years suddenly ran wild. Unable to contain myself, I blurted out, "Thomas, what are we now?" Thomas kissed my forehead indulgently. Silly. What else could we be? Cheers rose in the private room. The atmosphere was warm, like the stirrings in my chest. I never expected that just 2 days later I would hear Thomas himself shatter my one-sided wish. I smiled, but uncontrollable tears slid down my face. So that vague retort of his was also something Thomas used to soothe me while he hurried Vanessa into my place, wasn't it? The wind chimes in my bedroom tinkled as they swung, slowly drying my tears. My broken heart began to mend. Piece by piece. Thomas' Song was wrong. He was only the Song family's illegitimate son, and I was the Liu family's only daughter. We really shouldn't cling to one another, because we didn't belong together. The transfer application in my hand was stained by my tears. The ink bled and the page looked filthy, but that was okay. If this one was dirty, I'd print a clean copy. My Liu family never lacked replacements. I printed a new form, and when I reached the line for the destination school I called my mother. "Mom, which high school did you mean when you said you wanted me to study abroad?" "Yes, I'll go by myself." The wind chimes in the room chimed clear and bright, as if celebrating for me. I closed my eyes slightly. This time the face that appeared in my mind was not Thomas's. A man whose looks resembled Thomas by 30% but who was even more handsome and striking smiled at me, just as confident and earnest as 2 years ago. "Susan, sooner or later you'll give up Thomas and choose me." Back then I thought he was joking. Now, I repeated it silently in my heart. "Thomas, I truly don't want you anymore." After filling out the new application, I breathed a long sigh. My heart had quietly calmed. Then there was a sudden knock at the door. I froze. I'd been living alone in this house. The only people who knew the code were. I opened the door, and sure enough, Thomas's face was there. His voice was as gentle as ever. "Susan, you haven't come to say goodbye to friends in a long time." I was worried. I forced myself to speak calmly. "My stomach's not feeling well, so I won't be going." Just as I was about to send him away, out of the corner of my eye I saw an unexpected figure. Vanessa, small and slight, was crouched beside Thomas. When she met my gaze she shrank inward. Thomas watched her every move attentively and immediately drew her close into his arms. "Susan, you frightened Vanessa," he said. There it was again, Vanessa always put on that fragile, afraid to be bullied look toward me, as if I were some unforgivable villain. But I hadn't done anything. My expression cooled. "I told you I don't like people coming into my home." Thomas frowned slightly, displeased. "Vanessa isn't an outsider. Besides, she came because she cares about you." Before I could retort, Vanessa's eyes reddened. "Susan, I'm sorry. I know you've always looked down on me, but I take a bath every day," she added through tears. "I won't make your house dirty." At that, Thomas's brow knitted and he looked at me with displeasure. "Susan, Vanessa comes from a poor family, but she's not as hopeless as you think. You treating her like this really disappoints me." Vanessa timidly tugged at Thomas's sleeve, forgiving and understanding as always. "Thomas, it's fine. Don't argue with Susan." She sniffed and forced a wronged but stubborn smile. "After all, Susan said you two are childhood friends with that identity. How could I possibly compare?" "What nonsense. You are unique just as you are." Thomas cupped Vanessa's face with tender sympathy and soothed her gently. Then he looked back at me, his face cold as if frozen. He said heavily, "Vanessa is upset. I'll take her away first. Think carefully about your own behavior. Don't forget the transfer application needs to be stamped." I did reflect seriously on my poor judgment of character. Then I went and changed the code to the front door of the house. The resentment in my chest at last eased for a moment. Chapter 3. The next day, I took my new transfer form to school to get it stamped. As I watched the bright red seal that symbolized my departure press firmly onto the paper, my heart suddenly felt hollow for a moment. I was still dazed when someone blocked my way. Thomas frowned slightly. "Susan, did you change the code to your front door?" "After I dropped Vanessa off yesterday, I went straight to your place, but the door wouldn't open." I cut him off. keeping my tone brief. Yeah, I changed it. He looked slightly displeased. And, as if nothing had ever happened between us, asked with fake familiarity, "What's the new code? I could come over to take care of you." I replied calmly, "No need. I won't be living there after I transfer." Thomas's eyes fell on the folded application in my hand, as though he had just remembered something. "Oh right. I totally forgot about that. Don't worry, Susan, I'll come get mine stamped tomorrow." It had been a long time since we'd walked and talked like this. Ever since Vanessa transferred to No. 1 High. Such moments had become rare. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the last bit of reluctance slip through, and asked, testingly, "Between us, what's there left to worry about?" Thomas was silent for a long while before suddenly saying, "Susan, actually, I..." Before he could finish, Vanessa appeared behind him, holding a pile of notebooks and complaining playfully, "Thomas, you promised to help me study, where did you suddenly disappear to?" She handed the notebooks to him. "I saw your tutoring schedule already planned for the next 2 months, so I prepared the corresponding materials." Then she winked mischievously. "You won't be mad that I peeked, right?" "Of course not," Thomas smiled awkwardly, glancing at me with a guilty look. Seeing that I didn't react at all, he actually looked a little disappointed. "So while you were pushing me away, you were already planning a future with someone else. Only, your future never included me." I kept my expression composed, though inside the bitterness spread like aged wine. Deep and overwhelming. I dug my nails into my palm to stay clear-headed. "You two go ahead. I'll leave first." Vanessa acted as if she had just noticed me, startled like a frightened rabbit. Susan, are you upset because Thomas and I are studying together? But I come from a poor family. I don't have your resources." As she spoke, tears welled up again. I had no desire to keep playing along. "Move," I said coldly. Whatever trace of guilt Thomas had was gone. He grabbed my wrist, his tone laced with anger. "Susan, what's with that attitude?" Without giving me a chance to react, he yanked me toward Vanessa and barked, "Apologize to her." The last clean piece of my heart silently crumbled into dust. This time, I didn't hesitate. I raised my hand and slapped Thomas hard across the face. "Thomas, the one who should be apologizing," I said, my voice steady and cold, "is you, but not to Vanessa. To me." Chapter 4. One by one, I began sorting through all the things Thomas had given me over the past decade. This necklace, his gift for my 18th birthday, I'd only worn it to school once before I saw an identical one hanging around Vanessa's neck. She'd blushed and said, "Thomas told me that whatever someone else has, I'll have too." The limited edition teddy bear was gone, leaving only the box. Thomas had taken it, saying he liked the scent of my perfume that lingered on it. But the very next day, I saw that teddy bear sitting on Vanessa's desk. And then there were the high heels from my coming-of-age ceremony, the indigo-scented candle. So everything I thought was mine alone, Thomas had long since given to someone else. Not even equally. I thought of the way Thomas coddled Vanessa, the way he defended her endlessly. A mocking smile curved my lips. Since that's how it is, there's no reason for these things to exist anymore. I booked a flight for the next day, hoping to spend my last night quietly. But at 2 in the morning, a phone call jolted me awake. Half asleep, I answered. The line was silent for a long moment. I was about to hang up when Thomas's voice came through. "Susan, I'm sorry." My mind snapped awake instantly. If he was finally going to tell me the truth. Thomas spoke in a low voice. "Vanessa hurt herself. I can't leave her alone right now, so I'll have to postpone my transfer for a while." The hope I'd unconsciously lifted up fell to the ground with a thud, shattered. Pathetic. I suddenly wanted to ask him, "Then what about the pain I endured for you? The bullying I took in your place, what does that count as?" Thomas's voice continued. "Apologize to her." I froze, thinking I'd misheard. "What did you just say?" Thomas's tone was firm. "Susan, you really owe Vanessa an apology. Can you honestly say her self-harm has nothing to do with you?" I was struck speechless, because I suddenly understood. As long as Vanessa was there, every word I said would always be wrong. Thomas spoke again, his voice sharp and cold as ice. "Susan, you've really disappointed me. If you just apologize, I'll act like none of this ever happened. 2 months later. I'll go to the new school with you. Are you really going to be this stubborn and throw away all our years together? I could hear the threat hidden beneath his words. But there was no resentment left. No heartbreak, only disgust. I hung up decisively, blocked his number, deleted it. For the first time, I was truly looking forward to tomorrow's flight. The foreign scenery felt new and lighthearted. Someone took my suitcase from me. When I looked up, I met the eyes of the Song family's legitimate heir. Susan, long time no see, he greeted. I reached out my hand, smiling brightly. Long time no see, Theodore. Then my phone rang again, cutting through our reunion. I swiped to answer, only to see the number belonged to one of Thomas's friends. Puzzled, I picked up. Thomas's anxious voice came through the line. Susan, which class did you transfer into at No. 3 High? Why is everyone saying they've never seen you? Chapter 5. Before I could speak, Theodore's voice came from beside me. Susan, shall I take you to get familiar with your new school first? His expression was innocent, as if he were just being kind. Thomas's voice on the phone suddenly rose. Susan, are you with Theodore? Where the hell are you? I held the phone a little farther away, realizing for the first time how grating Thomas's voice could be. Where I am, I said coolly, has nothing to do with you. Thomas seemed not to hear me, his tone laced with disbelief. You ran off to Theodore just to spite me? All to get back at me, and you'd even go to that kind of lowlife. The words were getting uglier. I couldn't stand it anymore. Shut up. I took a deep breath and said firmly, Thomas, you're the one who's truly low. At last, I returned those words to him. Don't call me again. Everything between us ends here. I hung up swiftly, blocked the number, and deleted it. Peace at last. I turned to Theodore with a hint of apology. Sorry you had to hear that. He only smiled faintly. Then invite me to dinner. He winked. As thanks, I let out a breath and smiled back politely. Of course, the two sons of the Song family really couldn't have been more different. Back when Mr. Song cheated and his mistress gave birth to Thomas, the woman soon married into the family. Mrs. Song, however, was a force of nature. She divorced swiftly, took half of the family fortune, and left with her young, exceptionally talented son, Theodore Song. After that, Theodore changed his surname to Sue, following his mother, and settled abroad. My mother always spoke of them with admiration, saying that ever since Madame Sue left, the Song family had only gone downhill, so the young master title that Thomas Song flaunted so proudly was nothing more than an empty shell. Every time the topic came up, my mother would sigh. If only our Susan weren't so soft-hearted, of all people. She had to fall for Thomas. Back then, I thought Thomas couldn't be blamed for being born to a mistress. I only pitied him, grateful that my mother never opposed my choice. Now I understood, parents really do see farther than we do. The sea breeze brushed softly across my cheek, scattering my thoughts. I shook my head and raised an eyebrow at the road ahead. This doesn't look like the way to the restaurant. Theodore smiled. Aunt Lou gave me strict orders. Forgive me, Susan. I chuckled, glancing at the road bathed in sunset. Sure enough, the car stopped before a luxurious but understated villa. The new school was just a formality. Both Theodore and I had been trained as heirs since childhood. It wasn't long before we began receiving invitations from business circles. That night, I wore a violet gown my mother had chosen and held a champagne glass with practiced grace, mingling politely until I saw Theodore. He stood in a custom-tailored suit. The only striking detail was a violet bloom pinned to his shoulder, matching mine. When the people nearby tactfully left us alone, I sighed helplessly. Neither of us has much room to complain. Huh? We're both just doing what's expected. That dinner somehow became, after a few well-placed words from my mother and Madame Sue, an engagement party. We were adults, far past the age of childish romanticism. Theodore and I exchanged a knowing look, each pretending to treat it as one of our mother's little jokes. But we'd underestimated their determination to tie the two families together. When my mother gifted me a butterfly-patterned wristwatch, a few days later Theodore received the matching men's version from Madame Sue. If Theodore got cufflinks from his mother, I'd soon find the same model on my dressing table before a negotiation. It had almost become routine. But this time, Theodore looked me straight in the eyes and said slowly, Clearly. What if I told you, this time, it's what I truly want? He stepped closer, his voice calm and soft, like a stream flowing through my heart, leaving a trail of gentle ripples. Or rather, he said, it's what I've wanted every time. Golden fireworks bloomed above the cruise ship, looking into his bright, steady eyes. I felt my heartbeat stumble for the first time in a long while, and just like that, my story with Theodore began, naturally, inevitably. Chapter 6. After the engagement party, my family arranged for me to intern at our domestic branch. My mother was full of bright plans for the future. When the time comes, you and Theodore will handle things inside the company, while Sue and I take care of business outside. My father, in his usual dry tone, asked me to keep an eye on your mother. Don't let Madame Sue charm her away. With their teasing and expectations in mind, I boarded the flight home with a quiet laugh. When Theodore saw me off, he took one of the little bells from the wind chime and placed it in my palm. He had always been reserved and gentlemanly around me, yet even he couldn't resist using that faint chime to tell me he would miss me. Months had passed. Senior Class A of No. 1 High was now just a memory. When my old friend sent me the graduation photo, the one without me in it, it all felt strangely distant, like a life I had already shed. In the picture, Thomas and Vanessa stood side by side. They did look well matched. I let my gaze slide over their smiling faces, realizing there was no longer any trace of the old ache in my chest. One friend, however, was indignant. We were so sad when you left. But honestly, it was for the best. You have no idea, Vanessa's been strutting around like a queen ever since Thomas started fawning over her. She's even been spreading nasty rumors about you all over the place. We tried to clear your name, but she's relentless. And Thomas, ugh. That useless idiot, just keeps defending her. Seriously, you two were friends for over 10 years, and he's still blind enough to side with her? I sighed and typed back, maybe Thomas already decided I was the villain in his story. Then, frowning faintly, I added, but Vanessa never used to be that bold. My friend seized the chance to vent, sending me half a dozen screenshots. Here, see for yourself. They were posts from Vanessa's social feed. First post. Thank goodness for you. Without you, my coming-of-age ceremony would have been a total mess. 2 pictures. In one, Thomas was kneeling, focused, as he helped her into high heels. In the other, she posed with classmates. But in the corner, accidentally, was a shot of me sweating through my dress. I remembered that day. Oh right, I was the host as student council representative. She really went out of her way to catch me looking disheveled. Second post. He said he's sorry for his weakness. Next time, he'll give me a new teddy bear. My boy, I'll never blame you for the arrogance of others. Attached was a photo of that limited edition bear, the same one without the custom gift box. Third post. His restraint is always what makes him shine. My boy, after exams, don't let that indigo candle keep me company anymore. A photo followed, just the corner of that blue candle. I scrolled quickly, expression blank, until the last post made my fingers freeze mid-swipe. I'm completely yours now. The photo, a blood-stained bedsheet. A new message from my friend popped up. She's been hinting for ages that you were the other woman, making it sound like she and Thomas had some tragic, ongoing love story. Didn't expect you not to care at all. Ha ha ha. I smiled faintly. It wasn't that she was creating a false story. Thomas had just wanted the best of both worlds. After graduation, she even drugged him, my friend added. That startled me. She went that far? Yeah, everyone knows about it now. That's how she locked him down. Vanessa's only acting bold because she's got a legitimate claim now. But honestly, posting a picture of the sheets? That's beyond trashy. I bet Thomas regrets it already. I replied calmly, thanks for clearing things up for me. Don't worry, if she stirs up more nonsense, I'll let my lawyer handle it. We chatted idly for a bit before my friend ended with, I'm just glad you've moved on. Thomas isn't worth it. My fingers paused above the keyboard. Then I typed, yeah, and I realized it was true. There wasn't a shred of emotion left. The Thomas I had once loved so sincerely was now nothing more than a passing topic of conversation. Time really is the best medicine for everything. Chapter 7. The company headquarters was in the same city, so I decided to drive home to pick up some documents. My mother had wanted me to live comfortably, So she'd bought me a small villa with a garden. I pushed open the gate, but as I entered the code at the door, I nearly jumped. Someone was sitting in the hallway by the entrance. He turned his head, and a pair of bloodshot eyes met mine. I frowned. Thomas? How did you get in here? Then I noticed the bruises on his knees, dark, ugly purple marks. My brow tightened. You climbed over the gate to get into my house? What do you want? He didn't speak, just stared at me with a hollow, almost haunted look before suddenly saying, Susan, you've lost weight. I had no idea what that meaningless remark was supposed to mean. I turned, intent on leaving, but he lunged forward and grabbed me, so tightly it felt like he wanted to crush my arms. Fortunately, my training wasn't just for show. I twisted free and threw him off, then wiped my arm in disgust. Thomas, have some self-respect. He gave a low, bitter laugh. You're telling me to have self-respect? Susan, you and Theodore, what? You've already done everything abroad, haven't you? And you dare talk to me about decency? His voice broke, raw with fury and something darker. Do you have any idea how crazy I went looking for you here? I slapped him, hard, without the slightest hesitation. Watch your mouth. He stood there, stunned, eyes wide, looking at the mess of a man in front of me. I let my tone go calm, icy, almost detached. Didn't you want me gone? I went abroad just like you wished. You pretended to be bullied and let me take all the humiliation and the beatings for you. What's wrong, now that your plan worked? You're not satisfied? The color drained from his face in an instant. He stared at me, lips trembling, voice barely audible. You know, everything? Susan, I can explain. I shrugged, but I don't accept explanations. Then, spotting the shadow standing hesitantly outside the gate, I stepped closer, close enough for both of them to hear me clearly. Posting a photo of bloodstained sheets, where do you even find the shame to show your face again? Thomas, you're pathetic. I turned and walked back inside, calling the nearby security staff to escort them off my property. As I passed by the window, I heard a furious shout from outside. You bitch! You've embarrassed me completely. Even through the thick soundproof glass, the sharp crack of a slap rang out clear and distinct. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa clutching her face and sobbing. I closed the curtains, then texted Theodore my usual update. Busy right now. Miss you. Chapter 8. The next time I saw Thomas was at a welcome back dinner my friends had arranged for me. We were all adults now, and conversation in this circle had shifted naturally toward family businesses and investments. Soft lighting, faintly sweet wine, the atmosphere was relaxed, even pleasant. I let myself linger a little longer than planned, until an uninvited guest walked in. For a moment, the room went oddly quiet. One of my friends tugged at my sleeve, whispering, Susan, no one invited him. I nodded. That much was obvious. She exhaled in disdain. Those two are basically social lepers now. The family's gone downhill, and their reputation's even worse. Especially Vanessa, she clings to Thomas like he's some kind of prize, suspicious of every woman who looks at him. I tilted my head slightly. Sure enough, Vanessa trailed behind Thomas. When my gaze met hers, she instinctively shrank back, then shot me a glare full of venom. Thomas, oblivious or pretending to be, walked straight over and sat across from me. The others scrambled to smooth over the tension, but I excused myself and slipped out to the restroom for some quiet. Of course, she followed. Vanessa really hadn't changed at all. Same cutesy twin ponytails, same soft innocent makeup, same pure white dress straight out of a high school romance. A year had passed, but her mind was still stuck in adolescence. What she didn't realize was that in this world, the adult world, innocence isn't currency. Leverage is. Profit is. Once you lose your value, you get discarded. Simple as that. Her eyes were filled with jealousy so sharp it was almost madness. Susan, she hissed, seeing how obsessed Thomas still is with you, you must feel so proud of yourself. I looked at her reflection in the mirror, silent. If a few tears and dramatic words counted as devotion, then Vanessa's idea of love was truly twisted. She suddenly smirked, pride flickering in her eyes. But you probably didn't know, did you? That whole transfer thing back in high school, Thomas planned it because he didn't want me upset seeing you every day. He was never bullied. You got beaten up protecting him for nothing. Ha ha ha. I stayed calm. Because honestly, it didn't matter anymore. Yes, it didn't matter. Thomas and Vanessa were part of a life that would only drift further and further from mine, and I knew with absolute certainty I'd leave them both behind. For good. Vanessa's face twisted. What kind of reaction is that? Why aren't you angry? What are you so proud of? What gives you the right to look down on me? Just because your family's richer than mine? You're nothing. You couldn't even keep your man. Her voice rose until she was shaking with rage. She lifted her arm, ready to slap me, but a strong hand caught her wrist midair and shoved her back hard. Theodore stepped in front of me, his voice low and even. For your insult and attempted assault against my fiancé, I've already recorded evidence. The police have been notified. If you have something to say, you can explain it at the detention center. I couldn't help but smile as I looked at the tall figure in front of me. He'd clearly dressed up, every color and accessory matched mine perfectly. Childish. And somehow, adorably so. The police arrived quickly, the noise drawing everyone's attention. My friends came out to check on me, just in time to see Vanessa being shoved into the patrol car. She thrashed wildly, screaming, "Who do you think you are? My husband is Thomas Song, the only young master of the Song family. Let go of me. I need to see my husband." Everyone turned, knowingly, toward Thomas, but Thomas just stood there, watching the woman he'd once coddled and protected being taken away, expression blank. Hands still. He said nothing, did nothing. Ever the master of self-preservation. I looked at him one last time, and in that quiet moment, the boy who had once filled my youth collapsed completely into dust. Chapter 9. By the time we finished giving our statements at the police station, it was already late, so I simply brought Theodore back to my place. When I opened my eyes the next morning, breakfast was already neatly laid out in front of me. Leaning against the doorframe, I watched him washing the dishes with focused care. "So domestic now?" I teased. He looked up with a faint smile. "Well, I don't have an official title yet. I've got to be a little domestic, so my better half keeps a good impression. Otherwise, if she gets angry and decides she doesn't want me anymore, what would I do?" He brushed the tip of my nose with a soapy finger, half joking, half serious. I could only laugh helplessly, remembering how my friends had all stared at him last night, eyes sparkling with gossip. Scrolling absently through my phone, I caught sight of a trending headline and couldn't help but chuckle. "Well, you wanted an official title," I said. "Looks like it's coming." The news headline, bold and loud on the hot search list, read, "Lou heiress Susan accused of seducing a married man. Lou heiress leads scandalous life. Spotted spending night with unknown male." 2 articles, lined up perfectly, an impressive display of malice. Only, Vanessa must have forgotten, private villas usually come with surveillance cameras. Before the rumor could even gain traction, a video began spreading online. In the footage, the Song heir was seen forcing himself on me after I clearly tried to leave. His aggression captured in full clarity. Public opinion shifted instantly in Lou Group's favor. Still, skeptics remained. Fine. But what about her messy private life? Care to explain? She's so young and already a senior exec. Who exactly was that man she spent the night with? Meanwhile, Theodore was frantically trying to register a social media account, looking as if his laptop were about to catch fire. I watched him, amused. No need to rush. He ignored me, pausing only to kiss my forehead. "You shouldn't have to tolerate anyone tarnishing your name." Ding dong. New notification, "You've been followed by Theodore." I glanced down. Oh wow. An official verified account. Moments later, a new post appeared from that same account. "Hello everyone. On behalf of the Sue Group, I'd like to thank our future Madam President, at Susan Liu, for letting me stay over last night." The internet went dead silent for a moment, then exploded. Theodore looked up at me, eyes wide with mock innocence. I sighed, leaned in, and kissed him on the lips. Chapter 10. The partnership between the Liu Group and the Sue Group progressed steadily. 3 years later, Theodore and I got married. We chose a quaint old town abroad for the ceremony. Every house there hung colorful wind chimes. When the breeze passed through, their clear ding-dong tones rang softly in the air. like countless gentle blessings. As the wedding neared its end, I received a gift. No name was left, but the Song family seal on the box was unmistakable. After Theodore formally took over the Sue Group, he had launched a relentless, all-around campaign against the Songs. If the Song family had once been a crumbling mansion after Madame Sue's departure, then under Theodore's retaliation, it was reduced to scattered bricks and dust. He would never forgive the family that had betrayed his mother, and I hadn't hesitated to help him, if anything. I pushed even harder. The Song family's name had long since vanished from the business circle, because those who had betrayed me, I wouldn't forgive them either. So to receive a wedding gift from Thomas now surprised me. When I opened the box, I found a dazzling violet diamond ring inside, and suddenly, a memory I'd buried since 18 resurfaced. It wasn't vivid, just faint flashes. After a mock exam, I had been helping Thomas analyze his mistakes. At 18, my heart and thoughts were full of him. As I explained each problem, I was secretly imagining a future with Thomas in it. But I wasn't the only one distracted. Thomas had been watching me, his expression at that time completely sincere, without any trace of deceit. "Susan," he'd asked softly, "what kind of ring do you like?" Talking about something like that so early made both of us blush. After a while, I finally murmured, "Purple. I think I've always liked purple." And he'd replied just as quietly, "Okay, I'll remember that." The cicadas had been singing that day, long and warm. For a fleeting moment, I'd thought of forever. Now, looking at the ring, Theodore's voice broke through my thoughts, his tone edged with rare acidity. With the Song family in ruins, where'd he even get a violet diamond? Must have emptied his last pennies. It wasn't often he sounded that sharp. I couldn't help but laugh. "Then donate it for me." I tossed the ring to him casually, because when I was 16, a violet wind chime had already come into my life before any ring ever could. Back then, Theodore was still a quiet, well-mannered boy, too young to think about family status. He had only come back to China for a few days to help his mother with business. And by chance, while visiting the old Song residence, he met the neighbor's daughter. By chance, he heard her mother say, "Our Susan loves the color purple, doesn't she?" "That's wonderful. Purple is so elegant." "I love it too," her mother replied. On a whim, Theodore stayed 2 extra days and arranged for a violet wind chime to be shipped from abroad. During those 2 days, he witnessed his family's illegitimate son deliberately injure his arm, just to earn sympathy from that same kind-hearted girl. He also saw the girl's concern deepen, her care growing gentler by the day. And within Theodore, something called jealousy began to take root, wild and unstoppable. On the day he left, he'd gone to her house without thinking, knocked on her door, and handed her the wind chime. Unable to stop himself, he'd said something far too forward for his age. 16-year-old Susan had only stood there, unoffended. She'd smiled faintly and said, "Safe travels." After that, life unfolded like the wind, serene, content, without regret.